The Battle of Athens, Tennessee is not only a pristine example of the fight for democracy and freedom, but it's also an example of maybe why the government sees returning veterans as a threat.
A town infested with corrupt cops-turned-politicians who were lining their pockets by doling out tickets was turned upside down by some 3,000 veterans returning from World War II. The self-described wild vets became the target of law enforcement, who made a habit of picking up GIs and fining them heavily for just about anything. As election season approached, some of the returning veterans resolved to challenge the existing political monopoly by fielding their own nonpartisan candidates and working for a fraud-free election. The GI candidates promised an honest ballot count and reform of county government. But on election day, a town normally patrolled by just 15 deputies was swarmed with almost 200 armed deputies who turned up to patrol the precincts. Conflicts, of course, arose during polling, and a black man was shot in the back while trying to escape an officer assault. And when the polls closed, deputies seized the ballot boxes and took them to the jail. Opposition veterans responded by arming themselves and marching to the jail. In the end, the door of the jail was dynamited and breached. The barricaded deputies surrendered, and the ballot boxes were recovered. And the recouped ballots certified the election of the 5 GI nonpartisan league candidates. Now, in the present day, not only do we face rampant election fraud, what with e-voting and millions miraculously rising from the dead to cast their vote for President Obama.
But the Battle of Athens also demonstrates how veterans are fearless. I mean, they've already stared right into the face of evil during battle, so they're not going to be afraid to stand up to tyranny when they return to the States. And this is what makes them enemy number one to a government that is hell-bent on totalitarianism.
A controversial Department of Homeland Security assessment from 2009 lists returning veterans among terrorist risks to the U.S. A Morgan County, Indiana police sergeant recently admitted that the increasing militarization of domestic police departments is partly to deal with returning veterans, who are now seen as a homegrown terror threat.
Tanks, guns, armor, all tried and tested on the battlefield. Now some of it is here in central Indiana on our streets, being used to keep us safe.
Plus, you have a lot of people that are coming out of the military that have the ability and the knowledge to build IEDs and to defeat law enforcement techniques.
During the standoff between cattle rancher Cliven Bundy and the Bureau of Land Management, the majority of the militia that rallied to Bundy's side were veterans. And while the mainstream media tried to paint the militia as lawless and intimidating, residents of Nevada who witnessed the exchange expressed their support for the militia who did the job their sheriff failed to do.
That is bull crap. Those are my children and this is my community. And if Metro does not have the guts to come out and protect us, what are you here for? What do we pay you guys for?
And I want to tell every one of them militia, thank you, because not one of our government officials, not one of our sheriffs or a Metro would have saved us that day. They didn't save us that day.
And the government's disdain for veterans is evident in the sorry state at Veterans Affairs.
The Phoenix Healthcare Center was busted creating secret waiting lists that amounted to little more than death panels for 40 veterans. 1,700 vets there were never even placed on a list at all, rather left to suffer indefinitely. And now 42 VA centers across the country are under investigation for possible abuse of scheduling practices, indicating the vast scope of contempt facing returning soldiers. So imagine the betrayal felt by veterans when they learned that the Obama administration had traded 5 top Taliban commanders in exchange for 1 Army sergeant, considered by some to be a deserter, and whose attempted rescue on multiple occasions cost soldiers their lives.
But rather than get caught up in the mass distraction that is this prisoner exchange, stay focused on the real issue.
Our government wants to paint veterans as America's next terror threat. These are men and women who took an oath to protect the United States of America, even if it cost them their lives.
Why are they the threat? Because they're threatening you or me? No.
It's because veterans have been trained to take down America's enemies, and the shadow government that's now running this country is the real enemy number one.
Veterans, your skills and knowledge will take down the shadow government, and they know it. But don't play directly into the government's hand by allowing yourselves to be manipulated into a self-fulfilling prophecy of extremism. Instead, soldier up for the info war.